It says we are live. So, welcome everybody. It's a happy new year 2025. And a couple minutes late because, I have to tell you, we got 5 people here already. Awesome. Welcome. Tell me who you guys are and where you're calling from. And, here's one of the comments already. Let's go. All right. Welcome, Walter and Keith. Glad to have you on. I have to tell you guys, hopefully you guys can hear me fine. Eric Nordquist, welcome. And Walter Reed from Wisconsin. So glad to have you guys. I had the really weirdest dream last night, and I think it was related to this. Eric Nordquist from Baltimore, Maryland, welcome. Sound is great. I'm very happy to hear that because, anyway, let me tell you about my really weird dream. I dreamt I was back in English class, and I hadn't been all semester, or I don't know if it was high school or college, something like that. And I had to write a paper. And luckily I came to class, like one of the few times I came to class, which is weird for me because I never ever miss class. But in the dreams you do weird things. So so I'm having this dream and I'm supposed to write a paper, and I come to class and luckily the paper wasn't due yet. The teacher must have been high school, I guess. And this never happened to me in high school, by the way. But the teacher came by and he started whacking people on the back because they were mouthing off. And then even after the first few people got whacked, and apparently they got whacked hard because their faces were like, "Ow, that really hurt." And then some other kid mouths off, and I'm like, "You guys are morons." But anyway, welcome, Terry Davey from Watertown, New York, and Marianne Clements. So good to see you or hear from you. I guess you can see me. I can't see you. From Boise, Idaho. You missed our lunch, but you know that. So welcome, Marianne. Good to see you again, or to see your comment anyway. So anyway, it's just been a really weird dream, and I think it was related to because I've been trying to put together a PowerPoint for like a week, and I've just been so busy, and I literally just put it together like moments before we jumped on, and then of course my technology doesn't want to work, and I'm missing plugs and cords and can't hear anyway. So hopefully you all can hear me. I'm excited. And oh, by the way, I got to show off this is kind of a birthday / Christmas present because my birthday's in November. And so I got my new Utah hockey jersey. I'm going to the hockey game tomorrow night. I think they're at Calgary, but I go to the Delta Center and I help out with the TV crew. And I'll be doing it Saturday. I don't remember who they're playing Saturday. That's like 2 days away. So, but got my hockey jersey in November. And they didn't have, so if you go to the Delta Center, you can get these inaugural season patches. And so they said they didn't have any, but I could bring them back and they would put them on for free. And so, so the weird thing is I didn't do a home game until like right before Christmas. And so I got to turn around so you can see this, but I got to personalize. You can see my number here, number 24, because this is the year 2024. And you can see I got my name on there. so I got it customized. So anyway, excited for the Utah Hockey Club, and it'll be a lot of fun. So if you're in Calgary, I don't have anybody from Calgary. Boise, Idaho's as far north. Well, Watertown, is that north? I don't know which one's farther north, Boise, Idaho, or Watertown, New York. And Walter in Wisconsin might be there. So anyway, so today we are going to celebrate today is my 1000th episode. And so I just wanted to have a Gospel Tangents Live, share with you some of my awards. In fact, let me get my PowerPoint. And I don't do this enough to remember. Here we go. Present slides. And that didn't help. I've done this before. Let's see. I should have tested this before. Upload file. I don't know if I wanted to do that. Here, just cancel that. Oops. Try this one more time. I should do this more often. Share screen. That's really what I wanted to do. I know that it would be better with 2 monitors, and I wish I had 2 monitors. And oh, I don't have it open yet. Sorry, I gotta pull up my slides. I did it on a different computer, and of course, that computer didn't work, which made me late. So anyway, I've been doing this is my 9th year. Apparently, I've been counting. Hello, Alan from Provo, and oh, Terry Davy, 20 miles from Canada. You must be the most north. Okay, so I don't think this is, maybe it is. Oh, why is this not opening? Of course, we're going to have tech problems because, anyway, I should have done this. I think this looks like the right one. I think that's why I had this stream this morning, was because it was like, you've got to get this done. Oh, except for, wait a minute. Oh, it's just being slow. Okay. All right. So let's start my slideshow. I don't use PowerPoint near enough from the beginning, and now I need to share my screen so you all can see it. Here, I'm just going to do that. And I think you should be able to see my screen. Let me have back, make sure. Can you, hopefully you saw me standing in front of a, oh, that was bad. All right. Hopefully you can see my screen. So anyway, I wanted to do a best of 2024. In fact, I think I might start doing this from now on. And plus, today is our 1000th episode on Gospel Tangents. Thought it was time to celebrate with the new year and everything. So without further ado, let's talk about the favorites of 2024. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give the kind of the top 10 interviews of 2024. I'm going to talk about some of the best books that I've read this year that were published this year. We're also going to talk about some all-time favorites, some listener favorites, and then what I call underappreciated stuff we haven't talked about. And so anyway, it was so fun to see everybody wish me congratulations. I'll just shout out some names: Raymond Ortiz, Casey Griffiths, Jenny Smith, Margaret Young, Trevor Luke, Adam Stokes, Michelle Stone, Gene Judson, David Morris, Matthew Gill, Claire Barris, Alan Young, Matthew Harris, one of my favorite people of all time, Cheryl Bruno, and Daniel Stone. So it was really fun. I posted that this morning on Facebook and tried to get most, and in fact, there's some that I saved for the end. So if you weren't mentioned yet, save the best for last. So anyway, I should make sure, hopefully you guys can see me here. I really would like to have 2 monitors. Let's see. Marianne says, we see the screen. Alan Young, I'm married into the Bennett clan. Oh, really? That would be interesting. We'd have to do some checking later. All right. So decided I would go with a top 10 of 2024. Now, what's really interesting about this is, didn't mean all the interviews came from 2024, but of course, my number 1 interview was with Matt Harris, Second Class Saints. In fact, the funniest thing was 2 of his, I combined them into number 1, but 2 of the segments we did with Matt Harris, the most popular one was the episode where we talked about Hugh B. Brown, who was dropped from the first presidency. And not only was that particular episode the most popular of 2024, it flew past everything. It's the most popular ever. And we'll talk about the top 10 later. But yeah, it was the most popular of 2024. And then the number 2 interview, which I combined as number 1, was Inside the Room for the 1978 Revelation. I think I put second most popular ever. It was just second this year. I made a mistake on that slide. But anyway, Matt Harris, one of my favorite people of all time. He really feels like a brother. But that interview was fantastic. And you're going to see he's going to make another appearance here later, but not for this interview. So his book, Second Class Saints, fantastic. You should all own it. It sold out in the first month, and I'll be giving an award to this book later. So you'll hear about that again. But this was my listeners' favorite from 2024. Number two was a very big surprise to me because I didn't expect to make my own top 10 list, but it was my trip to Bountiful, Missouri to see the Fundamentalist Temple. So I can't tell you, I had been wanting to go see that temple for a long time because I knew it was being under construction. I got to go the week before the dedication, and they were like, "Oh, you should come back next week," but I was working and I couldn't. Um, so I was really surprised. I gave a presentation that showed some pictures and video from the Fundamentalist Temple in, well, they call it Bountiful. It's actually an unincorporated part of Missouri. So yeah, I was surprised that that my presentation was number two most viewed here at Gospel Tangents. Number three, Dave Butler, Temple Theology in the Book of Mormon. So that was a fun interview with Dave. He's a hoot, an absolute hoot. In fact, I know we said we should go to lunch. And so, Dave, if you're listening, I'm going to text you this week and we need to go to lunch because we still haven't done that. But that was a very fun interview with David Butler. And I should clarify, part of what gave me inspiration for doing this was I got a top 10 list from, oh, why am I not remembering the podcast? Look it up. But anyway, there was a different David Butler who was on their top 10 list. And so Dave Butler is a very, whether it's my Dave Butler or, why can I not remember the name of that other podcast? But anyway, so the seminary teacher, David Butler, which mine is not a seminary teacher. He's more of a surprise theologian. So anyway, both Dave Butlers made both top 10 lists. So and so I thought that was pretty interesting. Number four, this is kind of interesting because I did not publish this episode this year, but for some reason it was discovered. And Mark Shearer, who's written the 3-volume series called Journey of a People, it's a history of the community of Christ. It's a 3-volume history, kind of like the 4-volume Saints history for the LDS Church. Mark did that for the community of Christ. And for whatever reason, I mean, I love Mark. I think he's one of the coolest people ever. But this was a surprise to me that one of my interviews from 2023 made my top 4 in 2024. And it was on Emma Smith's second marriage to Louis Bideman after Joseph died. So that was kind of a surprise to me to see how popular. And by the way, I should mention really quickly, these are based on YouTube. About 2/3 of my listeners are on YouTube, and about 1/3 are like audio listeners only. So I'm just going with the YouTube because there are more people watch and listen. And the other thing is, what's nice about YouTube is old stuff can pop up, as you will see. Just, I don't know why they become popular. I don't know why this one became popular because it was actually a 2023 interview. But for whatever reason, this one was super popular. And by the way, that picture next to Emma, that is a photograph or a daguerreotype probably of Louis Bideman. So that was cool to be able to find a photograph of Louis Bideman. But yeah, that was super fun. And Mark, I could talk to Mark for hours. I probably should again. But anyway, so number 5 also was this one that came from 2018. So Matt was so popular, Matt Harris, with his Second Class Saints book. And we had actually talked about, well, he didn't have a name for it at the time, back in 2018, about how President Kimball persuaded the apostles to agree to a lift the ban. And so as going over my statistics, once again, very surprised. I mean, not surprised that Matt was in the top 10 because, of course, he's amazing. But that by interview, that my 6-year-old interview was most viewed. And so it's a fantastic interview. I could talk to Matt for days and weeks, and it's always good to talk to Matt. So, but yeah, surprise to me once again that my 2018 interview somehow became very popular again. So kind of a nice surprise. Number 6, we have David Boyce, who is another YouTuber, has the podcast 52 Churches in 52 Weeks. Talked about his introduction and his own personal faith crisis. This one. I released it in December of 2023. I actually interviewed him in October, I think, but it was released in December, so technically not part of 2024, but it did make my 2024 most viewed, and as you think about it, if you release it in December, you're not gonna have time for people to engage with it, and so, but yeah, for whatever reason, this made my, number 6 most viewed, so I consider David a wonderful friend. It's good, to talk to him on occasion, and, of course, we presented at the, John Whitmer Historical Association, and so that was super fun, and apparently you guys thought this was a very fun interview as well. Number 7, no surprise, Ryan Cragen. And, oh, by the way, well, this interview here, I think I interviewed him in December, but it was released in January of 2024, and, why are nuns Utah's second largest religion? I got really lucky because me and Ryan, we'd arranged this, months in advance. He comes out to Utah to go skiing, and he's got family here. He's at the University of Tampa, and oh, by the way, I just interviewed him last week, so he's going to be coming up again on his new book, Goodbye Religion, and we talked a little bit about that. Um, when this interview came out, uh, he had just published like a week or two before the interview that Utah was no longer majority Mormon and made the news. And so it was just serendipity that I had already prearranged the interview with him. And so that was a lot of fun. And to talk to Ryan about that, Ryan's another one I can talk for hours to. Um, Rob Lauer, a member of Reformed Mormonism because they have no leaders. But he was the number 8 most watched on YouTube video, converted to LDS by Fawn Brody and Sandra Tanner. So that's kind of a very interesting conversion story. Of course, he's no longer LDS, but he's part of Reformed Mormonism. So that was super fun to talk to Rob. He was out here for Sunstone, and that was a delightfully fun surprise. Apparently, my listeners really engaged with this interview as well. So that was a lot of fun. A number 9, I actually made a top 10, my own top 10 list here. Also, kind of another surprise. This was kind of a PowerPoint presentation that I gave to the Book of Mormon Perspectives Forum. So that's a group that meets on Monday nights. It's led by Paul DeBarth, Deb Luce, and Robert Cook, and they invite people to come and speak via Zoom. And Paul had invited me to talk about the sale of the Kirtland Temple, back on March 5th. I remember that because it's my son's birthday, March 5th, 2024. It was sold, and so a few months later, I gave that presentation about my experiences. I was lucky enough to go to the Kirtland Temple. I went to Nauvoo. I had a lot of church history sites this summer, so it was a lot of fun. And once again, I was very surprised that I made the top 10 most viewed videos here on Gospel Tangents as well. So super fun presentation. And then number 10, Paul Reeve and Christopher Rich. They've written a new book, This Abominable Slavery, which I think is an amazing book. We'll be talking about that a little bit more here. And the episode that got the most views on that particular thing was Brigham wrong? So we talked about the priesthood ban. So what I want to do is I want to stop sharing for just a moment and see if there's any comments here. Let's see, watching from Concho, Arizona, the punk rock polygamist. That's got to be Moroni Jessup. So Moroni, good to see you. Welcome. And all right, well, let's head back to the next part of the presentation here. And make this hard, I swear. Oh, there we go. Maybe this will do it. All right. Now, what I thought we could do is do best book awards for 2024. Now, I just created my own categories because, it's my podcast and I can do what I want. In order to be included in this, the book had to be published in 2024. And of course, I can't read every book because there's too darn many. But all of these books that I read that were published in 2024, I really like these books and I think they deserve an award. And so I'm giving them the first annual, I think I'm going to do this annually, best book awards for 2024. And so this is not comprehensive in any way. These are just books definitely published this year and that I really liked. And so we had to start out with, of course, Second Class Saints by Matt Harris. If this does not win the best book at MHA and Whitmer and everything else, something's wrong. Although he does have competition, but this book is just so amazing. I do not know how he got all the access to these inside conversations. I mean, I do know, he talked about it. Two of the best sources that were just amazing where he got access to President Kimball's diaries. And so, wow, what a gold mine that was. He also got access to Marion Hanks' diaries, which are incredible. And I will just mention there's a book by Richard Hanks that it's a long book. It's like at least 500 pages. And I'm like maybe 20% through. And it's really good too. But anyway, so Matt has, I cannot speak highly enough about this book. If you do not have it, go get it, go read it. It's just amazing. I think it should win Book of the Year because it's amazing. So congratulations, Matt. I'm happy to count you as a wonderful friend, and your book just blew everybody's socks off. And I'm also lucky that we've been talking to Matt for 6 years about this, and so so it's funny after my interview with Matt that my old interviews started getting really popular with Matt too, because people can't get enough of Matt, and it's well deserved, and he is freaking amazing, Matt. So good job. Second book, I decided to create a category called the Best Polygamy Book of 2024, Secret Covenants, edited by Cheryl Bruno. She is one of about a dozen authors. I've had several of them on: Marianne Clements, Claire Barris, Christopher Smith. Who else have I had on? It seems like I'm missing somebody. But anyway, this book, every chapter that I read about 5 chapters. It's an anthology. Every chapter is written by a different person. Every chapter I've read has just been amazing. Don Bradley. I haven't had him on to talk about it, but we need Don. If you're listening, we need to get you on because you do amazing work. But this book, Best Polygamy Book of 2024. I don't know that polygamy books come out every year, but I create my own awards, and so I'm going to call this an award-winning book because I gave it an award. It's fantastic. So good job, Cheryl and Don and Chris and everybody else who participated with this. It's just an amazing book, and you all should get it because it really has cutting edge research. And so check out my other interviews with some of the other authors. So this was hard because I didn't want to talk about the best book about racism because not only was Matt's book amazing, but Paul Reeve, Legine Carruth, and Christopher Rich wrote This Abominable Slavery, which is also an amazing book, a must read. You all should read it. So that was a super fun interview with Matt and Chris. I'm going to get Legine one of these days, I hope. But anyway, just an amazing book. Definitely you want to get that as well. Best biography of 2024. This one was hard because I had read several biographies this year, and I had to give it to Cheryl Bruno, although we will talk about other ones because I had to make up some categories because I thought they were very good books too. Come Hither to Zion by Cheryl Bruno and John Dinger. So Cheryl's a two-time award winner on Gospel Tangents. This book was amazing, and it's the story. It's the biography of William Marks, and I thought it was really good. I want to throw out another thing. There was a movie earlier this summer called 6 Days in August, which unfortunately, I thought it was a good movie, but unfortunately, a lot of people didn't go see it at the movie theaters, and so it wasn't in theaters for very long. It was put out by, I know Daniel Peterson was one of the executive producers of the movie, the opening scene, Brigham Young speaks in tongues, which I thought was really cool. I know they wanted to make it very historically accurate, and they also made an effort to try not to make Sidney Rigdon look terrible, which I think they did. This is kind of a power struggle between Brigham and Sidney Rigdon. But of course, William Marks, Emma Smith supported him to be the new leader. I thought they really tried to make William Marks look a little sneaky and conniving, and I didn't like that portrayal of William Marks in the movie. And I had just read this amazing book by Cheryl and John, and by the way, that was a fantastic interview with them as well. And so I didn't like their portrayal. I think it was because I'd read this book and I had a lot of background on William Marks that most people don't know. I mean, he's, a few years ago, I'm going to give a shout out to Daniel Stone. He had a book titled The Forgotten Prophet, and about William Bickerton. I think William Marks, I guess he wasn't a prophet, but he has been largely forgotten in Mormon history. And so Cheryl and John did a great job on this book. We're going to talk about some other biographies, so I had to create new categories to make those award-winning books as well. The next book. Now, this is funny because I've interviewed Christine Talbot, but I haven't published it yet, so that's coming out hopefully the first week of January. But this book came out in 2024. Sonia Johnson, a Mormon feminist. As I was preparing for this presentation today, I did not realize that Matthew Bowman and Joseph Spencer, of all people, were co-authors on this book. And so it's a fantastic book. We're going to learn more about Sonia Johnson. I thought this book, and let me just mention, I think it's the University of Illinois Press that's doing a series of very short books, and that's what's nice about it. It's like 150 pages, I think. It's very short, very readable, very fantastic. Learned a lot about Sonia Johnson. For those of you who don't know who Sonia Johnson is, you must be really young, not old person like me. She, back in the 1970s, the Congress had passed the Equal Rights Amendment, known as the ERA, to prevent discrimination against women on the basis of gender, basically. And in the late 70s, mid to late 70s, the LDS Church came out against the Equal Rights Amendment, and that infuriated Sonia Johnson, who was, I know she likes to be called just a housewife, in Virginia, but she had a PhD in, I want to say English, I can't remember, but she was well-educated, very well-educated woman. And she was excommunicated for her political activism, essentially. I don't think that was the official reason, but that's the real reason. And strangely, as I read this book, this will come out in the interview next week as well, so I'm giving you a little bit of a teaser here. Sonia was excommunicated in the exact same building as Kate Kelly was in Virginia. So that was pretty bizarre to discover that. So this is a great book. Haven't talked about it on the podcast yet, but it's actually the interview that I'm editing now, and so it'll be out next week. And so this is a book. I called this the best book of Mormon feminism in 2024 because I thought it's a biography too. It's a shorter biography, and it was a fantastic book, and we'll be talking about that next week. All right, and Christina Rossetti. This is part of the same series as an introduction to Mormon thought from University of Illinois Press. Christina Rossetti wrote Joseph White Musser, a Mormon fundamentalist, also a biography. So the biography category is going to be very tough this year because this is the third one I've got on here. So I called this the best fundamentalist book on Joseph White Musser. Christina, you did a great job. Hopefully, you get the message that we just really appreciate your work. And I will just say, Christina is one of the most delightful people you'll ever run into. she's just fun to talk to. And she says she's retired from Mormon history now, but I hope we can twist her arm to come on back. She got married. I think her last name is Gagliano now. She married a priest. I'm trying to remember. It's Anglican. I think he's an Anglican priest in Canada. So she left the country as well. But Christina, shout out to you. I thought your book was fantastic, and the interview was super fun as well. All right, let me stop here for just a second. We'll talk about all-time listener favorites for just a second. I just wanted to see if there was any comments. Let's see. Jared Jensen watching from Sandy, Utah. Welcome. And Walter Swingle, Matt and Joseph aren't co-authors, but edition of the series. Oh, thanks. Okay, because when I looked on Amazon, it had all three names listed, and I was like, oh, I didn't know they were. So they're editors, not authors. Okay, good to know. Did not know that. So I was surprised because, okay. I appreciate that information. All right, well, let's jump back to the slides here. And if I can remember how to share my screen. Here we go. All right, so since this is our 1,000th episode, I thought I would see if just talk about some of the all-time favorites. And as you can see, Matt Harris jumped to the top with the number one most viewed Gospel Tangents video with Fired from the First Presidency, where we discussed Elder Hugh B. Brown being removed from the First Presidency following the death of President McKay. He was not retained in the First Presidency. I know a lot of probably more faithful listeners didn't like my title there. They were like, he wasn't fired. I guess technically that's true, but he was very unhappy to not be retained in the First Presidency because typically it's unusual not to be retained. I will say it that way. So number two most viewed video is my good friend John Hamer, and I'm hoping to have John on the podcast here in the next month or so. And so the number two, and this was number one for a long time until Matt shot out like a rocket and replaced this, but comparing LDS and our LDS temple worship. So that's from January of 2018. You'll notice usually the older videos have more time for people to watch them. And so that was my number two video. Number three was Lehi's Atlantic Crossing with Jonathan Neville. And so, most Book of Mormon geographers believe that Lehi crossed the Pacific and Indian Oceans. And Jonathan made the claim, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, that he thinks that that's too long of a route and that Lehi would have traveled around Africa and maybe ended up in Florida or the Gulf of Mexico. Anyway, seems like a much easier route, and I think he might be right. Number four is my good friend Shannon Flynn. This is from my first year back in 2017. Mark Hoffman's Unusual Prison Visitors. Now, I will say the few years ago when Murder Among the Mormons came out, I got a big jump on all my Hoffman videos, and especially Shannon Flynn. Sadly, Shannon has passed away from lung cancer, which is interesting because he wasn't a smoker, but somehow he got lung cancer, and he's no longer with us. But a lot of people, I think Chris Thomas will be okay with me. Chris has said he loves my video of Shannon Flynn because Well, for one, it was before when Shannon he actually had surgery to remove part of his lung, and as part of that surgery, they cut or damaged one of his vocal cords, and so you'll notice in the movie, Shannon has a really raspy voice, but in my interview, it was before the surgery, and so he doesn't. So he sounds like the real Shannon Flynn, and so it was a super fun interview, with Shannon, and wish he was still around. The number 5 video, this was comes from 2024 as well. In fact, this was 2 days before my number 1 video, What Happened in the Room of the 1978 Revelation, and that was also with Matt Harris. And so, Matt got a lot of that information from Marion Hanks, who was a 70, and so, in the Salt Lake Temple, unlike especially most modern temples, they have an assembly room where the 70s and the 12 can meet. And so it was inside the temple when the 12 announced the revelation to the 70. And Marion Hanks described his feelings of what happened when he found out about the revelation. And so that interview is amazing, amazing, amazing. And it's just amazing what Matt Harris, I cannot speak highly enough of that guy. He's amazing. Did with his book, the information he discovered, and that's a super fun interview. All right, let's go through 6 through 10. This one was interesting. I mentioned it earlier because it made the top 10 this year as well. It's from 2023. Emma Smith's second marriage to Louis Bideman. That's with Community of Christ historian Mark Shearer. He's actually retired from official historian. Now he's just a run-of-the-mill historian, I guess. So anyway, super fun. I just adore Mark. I think he's amazing and very fun, very pleasant to talk to, and he's got a fun sense of humor. Number 7, with Brian Hales, did Emma deny Joseph practiced polygamy? So that one has consistently been one of my most viewed videos. Because it's tough to explain how did Emma deny it? Why did Emma deny that? And so I asked Brian, and he gave his answer to that. Number 8, also Shannon Flynn, Mark Hoffman's best fake, fooling the lie detector test. That was really super interesting, and so that was my 8th most viewed video. You'll notice some of these are repeats because these are fun interviews. Number 9 with Matt Harris. We talked about that earlier because it was also one of the most viewed in 2024. How President Kimball persuaded the apostles to agree to lifting the ban. That's my number 9th. And then the last to round out the top 10, also with Shannon Flynn, Hoffman's last bomb blew the lid off Mormon history. So that was another fun interview with Shannon, and I wish he was still with us. Let me see if there's any other comments. Do you have any thoughts on the Saints series? The last volume just came out recently, and I haven't picked that up yet. So I have too many books to read, and those Saints are too long. I've tried to listen to them on audio podcasts, or because you can listen to them, but I know some people like audiobooks. I just get bored with them. I don't. I just lose interest. I'm actually more interested. I know the church came out with, especially with the first volume, they had a podcast about it, and they would bring in like Mark Staker and other people. And I like the podcast because there's a little bit more interaction. It's not somebody reading. But I haven't read them, so I can't. I know some people have criticisms. I think they're great in the fact that they try to deal. I think they deal more honestly with the priesthood ban, polygamy, Mountain Meadows. Although I haven't read that yet, so I know other people have quibbles with them, and they're like they didn't go far enough, and so I don't know if that's true or not. But I need to read them, and I haven't. Walter says you got to listen at 1.5 speed or faster. I should pop these in here. And so maybe that would help. But I don't like to. to do that. So anyway, good idea. Um, Eric, I'll just pop this in here. Eric Nordquist. Some great interviews, some great people and great interviews. John Hamer is such a cool guy. Totally agree. And yes, Brian, I should definitely. I need to pick it up. I think on Amazon it's like super expensive, and I haven't gone to Deseret Book yet, but I'll be doing that soon. So anyway, let's jump back to the presentation. And of course, I'd love to hear all your thoughts as well. Let's see, I got to remember, they don't make this easy to share the screen. And it takes like 3 clicks just to get there, which I think should be faster. All right. So those are the all-time favorites, so the top 10. Now, I wanted to come out with what I would call unappreciated. So most of these are not previously mentioned. I have mentioned Paul Reeve, and this is basically in chronological order. I wanted to go through and just see what were some interviews we haven't talked about, kind of some of my personal favorites. I mean, honestly, I could put Matt Harris on here, like he's been on 5 times. I could put him on 5 times, but I didn't want to, like, if I've already talked about him, and I know I've talked about Paul, but the one thing about this interview, this was my 2nd interview ever with Paul Reeve, and episode 9 there, Paul Reeve's role in the race essay. It was my first kind of viral thing. I my first month, the month of February, I had 200 downloads for the entire month. And that episode 9, I got 600 for that one episode. And I was just like on fire. I was so happy. And I had 2,000 the next month. And so, so this is a super memorable. I will say I got Paul in a little bit of hot water unintentionally, because my original title was Paul Reeve wrote the race essay, and people were like, "What?" Anyway, I didn't mean to get Paul in any hot water with the church, but anyway, I've asked for forgiveness, and Paul's forgiven me. So anyway, I changed the title to Paul Reeve's role in the race essay. That was a super fun episode. Like I said, it was my 2nd ever, and I kind of had my first viral moment with it. And Paul's just such a fun, nice, cool guy. And shout out to Paul. His book deserves to win. And of course, he won this year with This Abominable Slavery. Number 2, Hugo Perego Talks DNA. I was so happy to meet Hugo, and we hit DNA hard. We talked about everything that we could do, and that was also my first year, a few months after Paul. And Hugo's a super nice guy. Really think the world of him, and so that was another personal favorite. So this was my what I would say, because we've talked a lot about top 10s, and none of these hit the top 10. And so this is kind of what I would say underappreciated, kind of a personal favorite that people I think don't talk about nearly enough. But I thought that was a super fun interview. Number 3, George Throckmorton. That guy was super cool. A prosecutor's view of Mark Hoffman. This one blew me away. So for those of you who don't know George, he retired from the Salt Lake Police Department. He's got so many stories. Basically, he figured out he deals with forged documents. How do we know they're legit? How do we know they're real? We talk. The purpose of the interview was to talk about Mark Hoffman, but he was involved in the high fine murders up in Ogden. He was involved in the Howard Hughes will, which he ruled to be a forgery. We didn't talk about any of that. We kind of talked about it off camera a little bit. I could talk to George for hours, but he was the one who figured out how Mark was aging the documents to make them look old. He said in one case, because he's the one who figured out that when you age documents artificially. So Mark was really good in getting period paper. Like he would go to the library and he would cut out old paper out of old 8 books that were published in the 1800s. So if you carbon dated them, they would date to the 1800s. And so that was one of the ways he fooled the FBI and, with that sort of stuff because they would carbon date stuff and it would date to the 1800s because it was. And then he would just write on it. But the problem is he had to age the ink so it looked like it had been there a long time. And when you artificially age it, it created this cracking. And George was the one who discovered that under a microscope. And so it was just, he is such a delightful person. It was just so fun. I understand he's kind of, you know, all the people that were in the 80s are aging, and so he's not doesn't have the greatest health. But that was just an amazingly fun interview. It was just fantastic. So um, that's another one of what I would call unappreciated. Another one underappreciated was Thomas Wayment. The funniest thing about this uh, purpose of the interview was to talk about the star and some because he's kind of a Bible scholar. He's a Greek. I think he's a Greek scholar, especially the New Testament. And so it was Christmas time, and I wanted to talk about some of the Christmas legends about Herod and the wise men and the star and things like that. And so that was kind of the purpose of the interview. And then at the end, I was just like, I said something about Adam Clark, not knowing that he was the one who had been doing research on Adam Clark, and I was like, "Oh, you're the guy who did that." And so that was just kind of one of those cool surprises. I guess I probably should have known who I was talking to, but that was Thomas is just very soft spoken, very low key, just an amazing New Testament scholar. And that was one of those interviews where I was like, oh, like, it's always fun to get a surprise in an interview. And that was one when I was like, oh, you're the Adam Clark guy. And so that was a lot of fun. I think this is number 4 if I'm counting right. I might not be. Sometimes I'm bad at counting. But anyway, Dan Vogel, I flew out to Ohio and we talked about the first vision and the book of Abraham. And then and I think the interview went like 4 hours. And so I was packing up and then Dan goes, "Well, do you want to eat?" And I thought, "Oh, we'll just, we'll go to some restaurant or something." He's like, "No, we can just eat at my house. That's fine." And so then for another 2 hours we sat at lunch and talked. Dan was just amazingly cool, so interesting, and I was surprised that's not as high. Like, it didn't hit my top 10 list or anything, but that was a fun interview as well. So definitely one of the underappreciated ones. If I'm counting right, I think this is number 6. Stephen Snow, church historian. He was still a sitting general authority when I interviewed him, and that was just one of my favorite interviews. This one kind of did go viral. I remember I was at Sunstone, and Kurt Bench had asked me to bring him something, and so I was at the benchmark table, and I was handing Kurt some stuff, and this complete stranger, I don't know who he was, still don't know who he was, walks up to me. He pulls his headphones out of his ears and says, "I'm listening to the Stephen Snow interview right now. It's amazing." And I was like, "Thank you." And it was an amazing thing. Um, we talked about the gospel topics essays and his involvement in that. Um, we talked about journals in the church that when a general authority becomes a general authority, he has to say, "I'm going to turn over my journals to the church if it's anything church related." He says it's kind of hard to keep it separate. Technically, you can keep your own personal journals, but if it has church information, then the church gets it. And so that was kind of interesting. And then the question, does the church hide historical documents? And, Elder Snow and Elder Jensen, really, especially Elder Jensen, have opened up the archives way more than they ever have been. And we owe a debt of gratitude for Elder Snow and the things that he did while he was church historian. And I would love to get another one on, but that was just a fun interview, and he was amazing. And I found out he was a Democrat, which was kind of cool. So that was fun. Another underappreciated interview. I think this is number 7 if I'm counting. and was Colby Townsend. He won the best thesis at the Mormon History Association in 2020, and he's a PhD student at Indiana. I can't remember how he's doing, but he's still at Indiana. We talked about the documentary Hypothesis in the Book of Mormon. We talked. I've always wanted to talk. When we went into this interview, I didn't realize. I mean, I kind of wanted to talk about the documentary Hypothesis, but I didn't know it was related to the Book of Mormon. We talked about Adam Clark. We talked about Israelite polytheism. And so once again, this was one of those interviews where I had like planned a few things, but it went way bigger than I ever imagined. And so it was a pleasant, fun surprise. Colby's one of the coolest people ever. And I wish this got more views because it was so much fun. It was a very fun one to do. I think this is number 8, Engineering Joseph's Visionary City with David Hall. So I think David is amazing. He's just got, he feels, he kind of reminds me of Elon Musk, but nobody knows who he is. He's an inventor. If you remember a few years ago in the news, there was this rich guy that was buying all this land in Vermont and was going to build a kind of a city of Joseph. And it was David, and he ended up having problems with the government. He ended up selling all the land, but he knows more about the 24 temples that were in the City of Independence than anybody. You know, I thought John Hamer was an expert, and John Hamer is an expert, but David Hall knows so much about that, and he's making inventions to he still would like to build a city somewhere, to like build this city, the city of Joseph kind of a thing, that Joseph Smith had envisioned, and he's doing the engineering. And so it was just super fun, not only because he's got like an electric car company, and he's making these modular apartment buildings kind of that are kind of like the Jetsons, where you know the dishwasher comes up out of the floor and the shower comes out of the ceiling, and then it just, they're space saving things for, anyway. The guy, I don't know how he sleeps because he's just got so many ideas. And if you ever can tour his companies, it's just like, oh my gosh. So anyway, super fun, super interesting. He's kind of the City of Joseph, you know, guy. And so that was an interview that I just thought was really fun, really interesting. And anyway, so let's see. I think this is number 9 or 10. I think number 9. Sally Gordon. She is one of the most delightful people you will ever meet. I remember her. She teaches law and history at the University of Pennsylvania. She's got a PhD in both law and a PhD in history. She talks about constitutional issues of church and state. She wrote an amazing book called The Polygamy Question. Or is it the question of polygamy? I think it's the polygamy question. 10, maybe 20 years ago. I don't remember. It's an older book, and it's fantastic. She dived in. She's a non-Mormon scholar. She dived into the Reynolds versus United States polygamy case that the church lost, and you know, the Supreme Court said that we couldn't practice polygamy in 1890, and then a few months later, the manifesto came out, and you know, the church abided by the Constitution. But she was also in the Helen Whitney film The Mormons like 20 years ago when President Hinckley was on there, and I remember her from the documentary with Helen Whitney, and I found out she was teaching at BYU. Or she wasn't teaching. She was given an address about church and state or something like that, and a religious freedom, something like that. And I knew who she was. She had no idea who I was. I walked up to her after she spoke and introduced myself. "Hi, I'm Rick Bennett. I'd love to talk to you if you're in town." And she's like, "Yeah, let's do it tonight." And I was or I think it was the next night. And I was just like she was just so cool, so delightful, and so smart, like, the church and state, and she's pulling out Supreme Court rulings off the top of her head, and it was just it was a super fun interview. I she's just such a delightful person, and it was a fun interview. So, hopefully this is number 10 if I'm counting right. Um, Jesse James, Dr. Jesse James, he was a professor at Graceland University, and, so we talked this is another one of those interviews, we titled it "A Scientific Exploration for Spiritual Experiences." So he's a research psychologist. I just interviewed him again last week, and, we're gonna be talking about the psychology of conspiracy theories, which I think is gonna tick off a lot of people, because we talk about everything, from the moon landings to JFK assassination to flat Earth to, polygamy denialism, polygamy skepticism, and, so I remember joking last week with Jesse, I'm like, "We're gonna get a lot of hate mail. I'm gonna get a lot of hate mail for this." Anti-vaxxers, all that stuff. So anyway, this interview, I'm trying to remember when this was. This was like a few years ago. And he lives in Iowa, and he's professor out there. I guess he's not at Graceland anymore, but anyway, he's still a research psychologist. And I didn't know we were going to talk about the Fowler stages of faith, so that was a cool surprise. And he's just a very very smart person, um, and plus he's a stat guy and so we talk each other's language, and he's just that was the I remember being a little bit disappointed that that wouldn't get more views, but I guess it was a little sciencey, and I'm a science guy and a math guy, and it was a fun interview for me, one of my favorites, and so I think if I'm counting right, that was number 10. Number 11 with Joe Jessup. Now I've just had another one, and I could have put it in here, but Joe was the first person who was a former member of the Apostolic United Brethren, AUB. Also, I've had 3 grandsons of Rule and Allred on, and Joe Moroni Jessup and Josh Thompson are all cousins and all grandsons of Rule and Allred. And so Joe, we got along so well because he used to play basketball, played college basketball, which I never did because I wasn't nearly that good. And so like Joe's just he's a hoot, and it was fun to really dig into fundamentalism, and that was a fun interview. I think this is number 12. Uh, so with Philip Beale, this one I have to tell you, I went in a complete skeptic and came out a believer. I don't think that doesn't happen very often. So Philip Beale, he's a non-Mormon from England, and he's kind of a modern day Christopher Columbus, like he really is. And he was in the UK Navy for a few years, and he was like, it takes too long to become a captain. I just want to sail my own bus ship. And so um, he's done a lot. He's recreated a lot of ancient voyages. The first one was from like Indonesia to Africa in like 300 AD ship or something. People were like, that we don't believe that's possible. And he proved that it was possible. And then he found out that the Greek historian and philosopher Herodotus had said that ancient Phoenicians from 600 BC, and he found a 600 BC ship in France, and he modeled his ship after that. They circumnavigated Africa, and so he wanted to do that, and unintentionally became a Heartland hero. um, so his first journey, he went through the Suez Canal down to Africa to the Cape Town, and when he got to Cape Town, some big storms, kind of like in the Book of Mormon. But secondly, when he was trying to go up up the west coast of Africa, the winds and the current took him only 300 miles from Florida, which was not his goal. So he kind of unintentionally showed that if you sail around Africa, you're gonna end up in, like, Florida, and he turned the ship around and circumnavigated Africa, and then he repeated the trip. This time, instead of going around Africa, he went through the Mediterranean Sea along the northern route, and, he, went through the Straits of Gibraltar and then, a little jog down Africa a little bit, and then just took the currents all the way to Florida in 9 months. And, so he did so Heartlanders believe the first trip was basically Lehi's voyage around Africa, and the second one was the Mulekites trip, and he proved that you can do this in a 600 BC ship. And, so, and, like I said, he's the first person who's ever done it. He didn't know anything about the Book of Mormon until the Heartlanders contacted him and said, "Hey, we'd like to buy your ship." I mean, the funniest thing about that second voyage, he got here, like, just as COVID hit, and they were like, "Hey, you're not American, you gotta get back to England." And so he left his ship docked there for months in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and flew back, and then he decided he was gonna try to sell it to a museum in London, or England anyway, and, so he cut the ship in half, shipped part of it half of it over, to England, and then the Heartlanders said, "Hey, we wanna buy your ship," and so they bought it, and they shipped it to Iowa, and then they've recently got the second half of the ship, and so they're restoring this ship in Iowa. And anyway, so if you go to the Phoenician Museum in Iowa, it's literally across the river, the Mississippi River, from Nauvoo in Iowa, and they're trying to put that together. But Philip Beale, that was one of those really interesting interviews, and I think the world of Philip. I think he's amazing, and still not LDS, and I don't think he has any desires to be, but he's an amazing sailor, and it was a very fun, interesting interview, and I actually got to go see him in DC a year or two ago, and that was a lot of fun. I think this is number 12, underappreciated interview with Dr. Trevin Hatch from BYU. He's one of the librarians there. He's a Jewish studies scholar, and he's the author of A Stranger in Jerusalem. So we talk about the historicity of the Gospels and real New Testament history. We talked about Goliath, and it was just very, very fun interview. I think he's an amazing, amazing New Testament scholar, and I want to go to Jerusalem with him because he's going to give an amazing tour of Israel if I can ever go. So once again, I don't think he's not super famous. I think he's an amazing, amazing scholar, one of the best scholars at BYU that they have. And his book, A Stranger in Jerusalem, is fantastic. I would have given it an award, but that was before this year. So very good. Underappreciated. It's hard to call John Hamer underappreciated. But this was a long interview where we were talking about the succession crisis, but I didn't know we were going to go into all the different schismatic groups. As you can see on that list there, the Whiteites, the Cutlerites, the Strangites, the Thompsonites, the Morrisites, Rigdonites, Brighamites, Strangites, like Josephites, Hedrickites. It was just, he's got the amazing book. It used to be on my shelf behind me. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a fantastic book with all the dots on it and everything. And you would think, everybody appreciates John Hamer, and I guess he was in my top 10, but this was just a really super fun interview. And like I said, I'm looking forward to, hopefully we're going to have another interview here in a month or so with John again. And he's just, I can talk to him for days. I think this might be, is this the number 15? This one didn't make any top 10 lists. And I think it should have, although it was fairly popular. But I don't know why it hasn't made the top 10. Um, and I think I titled it "Bad News for Religion" because he studies disaffection, and he's just written a new amazing book. I guess that did make my top 10, but once again, Ryan's a statistician. Well, he doesn't claim that, but I say he is. And so he talks my language, and he's actually. I talked to him last week as well. I've got so many interviews lined up. It was good to see Ryan again. His new book, Goodbye Religion, is just fantastic, especially if you want to understand faith crisis. Ryan was interesting in that we talked about his faith crisis, which I did not expect to do. That's coming up in a few, but this one here, Utah is no longer majority Mormon, um, and you know, there was. I could talk to Ryan for days. He told me that there's an international society for the study of religion in Lithuania in October. And I was like, I would never go to Lithuania, so I don't know if I'm going to go, but I think it would be a lot of fun because I actually mentioned it to my wife, and I was like, let's go to Lithuania. And she goes, why? And I'm like, well, you're not going to like why I want to go, but let's just go. So I don't know. I don't know if I'll go, but I would like to go. So anyway, I got a few more things to share, but I'll stop for just a second and see if there's any other comments here. All right. Oh, you know what? Oh, Allison. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of comments in here. You know what? Oh, there's some great comments here. Karoli Vazzy, I hope I said your name right. I love the M. Quinn recordings a lot too. I did 15 and I was worried that we've already gone over an hour on this. I was worried about going too long because I loved the Quinn interview as well. But I didn't want to include everybody. And it's hard to call Quinn underappreciated. And so I was kind of going for, kind of the below the radar kind of people. And I will agree also with Alan Young. The Paul Toscano podcast got me hooked. I love Paul Toscano. He definitely speaks his mind. But once again, he's kind of famous, and so I didn't want to put him underappreciated because I think a lot of people appreciate him. Paul's amazing. I love Paul. Let's see, Eric Nordquist. In those Vogel interviews, Dan comes across as very sweet and genuine, and I would agree with you. Like, seriously, one of the nicest people I've ever met. I think Dan is super cool, and I wish he would come to Utah more often because he would be on my podcast a lot more than he has been. Alan Biggers, yay, we love you, Rick. Thank you. Brian T. There was a good biography of Joseph F. Smith not that long ago. I know. There's actually. Oh wait, maybe I'm thinking there's a Joseph F. and a Joseph Fielding Smith. So yeah, I agree with you. If you're talking about the one with Steve Taysom, I haven't been able. Steve lives in Ohio, I think, or last I heard he lived in Ohio. I can't remember. It's got Thunder in the title or something like that. Anyway, it's a long book and I need to read it. And when I have people on, I like to read their books, and he hasn't agreed to an interview, so I haven't read it. That's part of my motivation sometimes is like, oh, if he's going to be on the podcast, I got to read the book. and it's a long one. And so that's one of the nice things about the University of Illinois, because there's another one with Matt Bowman, and I actually got 2 copies, so I'm going to be giving one of those away. And I was hoping Matt was going to come to Utah, but his wife, well, congratulations, she's pregnant, but because she's pregnant, she's not feeling well. And so she couldn't travel. And so therefore Matt couldn't travel. And if he had said yes, I would have read that book, and I probably would have figured out a way to put it in my best books, but I haven't read it yet. So I'm sure I love Matt. I think he's great. So I haven't I've interviewed Matt about his other book, and Bigfoot, and because he did that. So, but I I haven't gotten Steve Taysom on mostly because it's just been kind of inconvenient, and it's a long book. And then the Matt Bowman, because I think if I remember right, Stephen Taysom did Joseph F. Smith, and Matt Bowman did Joseph Fielding Smith. They're two different people. Are they father and son? They might be. But anyway, I haven't interviewed either one about those books. But that's why if anything, I'm an opportunist. Let's see, Eric Nordquist. Matt Bowman is that author. I think there are interviews, but not on that biography. Yeah, I'm trying to get Matt on. I will tell you this. I think I put it in my newsletter. Paul Reeve and Matt Harris, how could I not remember his name, and Alice Faulkner Birch, who I don't know as well, are giving and I don't know if it's a fireside, but they're giving a presentation. It's on a Sunday, January 26th in California, Southern California. You're supposed to register for it. I registered. I think I'm going to be busy and I'm not going to be able to go that week. But they're also speaking again, all three of them, I think, in April here at the University of Utah. I was hoping that if I went to that California thing that I could get Matt Bowman, but I don't think I'm going to be able to go. So, Kurt Frankham, one of my favorite podcasts. Thank you, Kurt. You're one of my favorite podcasts too, Leading Saints. Kurt says he's only at 800. You got to catch up. Yeah, come on, Kurt. That's funny. I break up mine more than Kurt does, but he's. I would just mention Leading Saints, fantastic podcast. And Kurt's an amazingly good friend. We text frequently, and in fact, Kurt, we need to go to lunch. So let's do something. Yeah, Steve Taysom is the author. Thank you, Brian, of the Joseph F. Smith. Walter said, will you be emailing this PowerPoint deck out? I definitely need to catch up on many of those. Oh, I could. I'll send that to you, Walter. I've got your email. If anybody else wants it, I'll be happy to. It's fine. Oh, actually, did I miss something there? Oh, no, I got it. Poke Phantom. Hello, made it from Saratoga. Is that Saratoga Springs, Utah? Are you a neighbor of me and I did not know this all this time? Or is this Saratoga Springs, New York? Let me know. But if you're a neighbor, we need to get together, dude. Let's see. Nathan says, cool. Is there a pro or an anti-mo? Is this an pro or anti-mo channel? Neither. I'm almost offended that you would ask that. I'm like the best source. I'm not pro and I'm not anti. I'm like down the middle. But anyway. So I just try to, tell it like it is. I'm not trying to tear down anybody's testimony. And I'm not going to bear my testimony. Like, we dive into Mormon history. That's what we do. And so I'm neither pro nor anti. I am just, this is the history. So Poke Phantom, we're neighbors. Then we need to hook up then. Let's get together sometime. Good stuff. Thank you, Nathan. And Brian, you're asking it to be a very hard question that I don't want to answer. Do you watch Michelle Stone's channel, 132 Problems? I will say yes, probably more than I should, but probably not as much as I should too as well. Any thoughts on polygamy deniers? I have lots of thoughts. Do I want to share them? I'm not sure. Let me say this. I am a big friend of Michelle Stone. We talk probably monthly. I disagree with her very strongly, and she knows that, and we have lots of conversations all the time about this. And by the way, I forgot to mention, let me give a shout out to Michelle and Cheryl Bruno as well. They've put together a new Journal of Mormon Polygamy. They're having a conference in March, and I was meant to put it on my newsletter, and I forgot. It's at Utah Valley University. If I look up my calendar, I can tell you the exact dates. I think it's a Friday and a Saturday, if I remember right. So I disagree very strongly with polygamy skeptics. I think it's interesting because, Cheryl's written, she won 2 awards on my show for the polygamy book. Well, the one was a polygamy book. The other one was a what was related to polygamy, sort of related in the fact that William Marks was against polygamy. And I think Cheryl does amazing work. That's why she is a 2-time award winner here on Gospel Tangents. I got to jump up to March here. And then, of course, Michelle Stone is on the other side, and she thinks Joseph didn't practice polygamy. And so the idea is they're trying to get the groups together and, let's talk about our disagreements. My biggest issue with all of the polygamy skeptics is that they don't publish in peer review, and I'm big on peer review. That's why I'm here. My tagline is the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. So I'm talking to the best people. I do chuckle a little bit when people say I should have Michelle Stone on, and I'm like, I did, like a couple years ago, but it wasn't to talk about polygamy skepticism. It was because her cousin of all people is Mark Hoffman, which was a super fun interview. So I have had her on. The polygamy conference at Utah Valley University is March 21st and 22nd at UVU. And so, what happened here? I'm on the wrong screen here. I lost my screen. But I got way too many windows open. And so I think it'll be interesting. I'm planning to go. And so there we go. I got my screen back. So, I think that's kind of where I stand. I count Michelle as a good friend. And here we'll see what Nathan has to say here. Michelle Stone is well-intentioned, but I think her history is not correct on polygamy. I would agree with you, Nathan. But I will, one of the Cheryl's big things is Michelle is bringing up stuff that that mainstream historians haven't paid as much attention to as we should. And so that's fine. I think we should. Brian says, sorry, I'm fishing for a fun soundbite, as I'm sure you have strong thoughts on polygamy deniers. Yeah, I do, but I don't want to. I'm not. So that's one of the things. Like, I'm one of those guys. This kind of goes back to the question: am I pro or anti? Neither. I'm a scholar. I'm not a scholar of Mormon history. I mean, I am, but like an amateur. I'm not. I don't have a degree in history. I can talk statistics all day with you. You can come to my class. I'm teaching a stat class in at UVU in the spring here. You can sit in if you want to listen sometime. But I'm more of an amateur historian, if anything, and a big aficionado. But I'm not here to be like, they're all wrong, they all suck. That's not what I do. That's not my thing. I guess you got your soundbite, but please put that in context. Because I'm not here to call anybody out. I'm just here to tell the true history, good history from literally the best scholars on the planet. A lot of them are here in Utah, so it's really nice. It makes it nice. Paul Reeve, Matt Harris. Of course, Matt doesn't live in Utah, but BYU, Utah State, Patrick Mason. I haven't mentioned Patrick Mason. I mean, he's great. Matt Bowman. They're all so great, and so I just want to have good history. And I will also mention this. I don't know. I think it's public knowledge, but I've been the one pushing Michelle that if she wants to come on my podcast, that she needed to at least present at Whitmer. She actually got accepted, and they kind of pulled the rug out from under her. And so it's still a standing offer. I actually, because they pulled the rug out from under her, if she wants to present that, she's welcome to. And so I'm not totally opposed, but I would like to make sure that the standards get up a little bit higher before I have her on. But yeah, she was going to present, and I actually, well, it's funny. I gave her an idea for her presentation at Whitmer, and then she gave me an idea for my presentation, which I got turned down for at Whitmer, but I'm going to try for MHA. Well, hopefully I get approved. We'll see. Um, so anyway, Nathan also asked the question, what are your thoughts on the online primary children's manual and its inclusion of polygamy? I know Michelle had a lot to say about that, but I didn't actually watch it. I'm usually kind of one of those guys. I'm not a knee-jerk reaction guy, and so it would probably be better if I was. It would be better for my views if I was. I haven't looked at it. I haven't. I've seen a lot of people complain about it, both faithful and uh, and not. I haven't watched it. I I probably should, but I also don't want to be to be a ranter like they're wrong because of whatever. That's not what I do. Like I would rather talk to a Todd Compton or Dan Vogel or Richard Bushman or Brian Hales or somebody like that is an expert, because I know a lot about polygamy, and I can probably tell you guys a lot about polygamy, but it's usually from I'm not a pundit. Like I try to think of myself more as a reporter, try to get good information, fair information, accurate information. I'm fine if people disagree. You can believe the Book of Mormon. You don't have to believe the Book of Mormon. I have people on both sides. I probably should have mentioned William Davis. Like, I think his book was great, but anyway, but I also like the heat to bear down, because I'm not. I should. It would be good for it would be great for my views if I was a ranter, because people who rant, boy, they get the views, and because there's strong opinions against them. But that's not what I do. It's not my thing. I'm not a ranter. So Marianne says, Cheryl Bruno, Michelle Stone, and I didn't know this. This is breaking news. Submitted a proposal for MHA in June. Fingers crossed. Yeah. So I would love. It's funny because when I did Whitmer, there was a bunch of presentations I wanted to go to, but I couldn't because I was presenting. So I hope that doesn't happen, because I think the world of Marianne Clements, because she's another one of the underappreciated ones. Her interview about Nauvoo crime, as well as her Turley. Excuse me, I should have got a drink of water. Her Turley polygamy episode, fantastic. If you guys don't know Marianne, she's amazing, and she deserves a ton more praise than she gets. But yeah, I didn't know. That's great. So, and Cheryl, I've already talked about. Michelle, that'll be fantastic. So if you get accepted, Michelle especially, I'll talk to you. But I've already talked to both Cheryl and Marianne twice on my podcast. Awesome interviews. You should watch them both, all four of them. And Michelle, I've had on. We talked about Hoffman because she's a family member. So that was super fun. So I have my fingers crossed for you too. And if I get accepted, please don't present at the same time as me. And I know you don't have any control over that, but I want to go. So anyway, all right. Wanted to just finish up my presentation here. I knew this was going to be a little bit long, and I had to stop it. That's why I didn't do more underappreciated ones. Let's see here. Let me figure out how to share my screen again. They really need to make this easier. Because I shouldn't have to press 3 screens just to share my screen. I think this is it. All right. So we talked about Ryan Cragen. So some viewer comments. These were generally a little bit more than just the congrats, although Reed Russell, thank you for the congrats, and Eric Rogers, I think you guys are amazing too. Enrico Polito, congratulations and thank you. Thanks to your podcast, I came to know scholars like Matt Harris, Don Bradley, Brian Hales, and many others, and read their wonderful books. Your open-minded approach gave me the opportunity to come to know some others that are not so good, but rather questionable. Not too many, though. Thanks again. You've built a wonderful library. And I thank you, Enrique. I think I know Enrique because I think he won one of my contests one time. So thank you for the kind words, Enrique. I really appreciate that. Jared Broderick, well done and thank you. I know this accomplishment represents a lot of personal sacrifice and not enough compensation. I agree. Thank you, Jared. So you're very kind. And I think this person is from the Netherlands, and I don't want to butcher her name. I I want to say Bauke Weirda. Hopefully that's right. And if I mispronounced your name, I am so sorry, but you had some very kind words as well. The interview with John P. Pratt is my favorite. I love John Pratt. He's one of my favorites too. I probably should have included him, but I had to keep it short somewhere. His insights about the sealed Book of Mormon, published in 2019 and translated from a sealed part of the gold plates Moroni brought back and translated by Mauricio Arterberger, are of great importance. We miss his knowledge and humor. I do too. He would be so excited watching the unfolding of the second invitation. I know I am. Whoever is interested in gaining more knowledge of God, his son, and his ways should be reading this book. So thank you. I hope it's Bauke. Thank you so much. You are very kind. Oh, I thought my thing, I guess I'm going to have to end because my battery's running low. So I think that was my last, yeah, that was my last slide anyway. So I thought I had plugged in. If I look around, maybe I can, but it's been going for an hour and a half anyway. So, oh my goodness, Dave Clausen, you are something. I will have to talk